Hello, friends. I'm Jonathan Pishner with Apex Counseling, and I wanted to spend some time today on a tip that I end up giving couples for healthy relationship communication. Because there's a belief that a lot of people accidentally come up with that gets in the way of healthy communication. So I want to talk about it today and give people a different frame for how to solve a problem in a marriage or other love relationship. So one of the things that a lot of couples mistakenly think is that if they're going to have a difficult conversation, that they should be able to sit down and talk things out and come up with a permanent and binding resolution all in one conversation. And what's weird is most of us, if you said, hey, where did you get this belief from? We'd be hard pressed to say, because it's not like that's in any of the usual advice for couples, and it's not like that's taught anywhere. But if you look at what couples do, especially when they have to have difficult talks about how do we want to parent our kids and should we move to this place, and you watch how they behave, you can see how many couples really think that they should be able to sit down, talk it out, and then it's done. And I really just wanted to point out today that that is not a system that works for 99% of difficult conversations. And so my tip today, my thing for couples to think about is to get away from the idea that you're going to talk through a difficult and complex subject all in one shot. The reality is when couples are most successful at this, what they'll actually do is they'll spend some time talking about it, whether that's, and that can be anywhere from 5 minutes to 5 hours, but at some point they'll start going in circles. And, let's say it's about how do we parent our children. At some point they'll get to a place where it's like, well, I think this, and there's just nothing that can be said that is going to change anybody in that moment. Once you've gotten as far as you can for the day, it's really time to end. Because if you don't, the thing that often happens next makes the conversation look successful, but it really isn't. If you keep both people there long enough, eventually somebody will give in. The fact that somebody gave in doesn't mean it's resolved. In fact, what it really means is that somebody verbally gave in, but are not at all convinced this is the right thing, and you're really setting up for some wonderful resentment a year later, 5 years later, who knows? But this is almost certainly going to come back around if you just hold both people there long enough until somebody finally gives up and just goes with what the other person wants. It's much wiser to get as far as you can, break, call a halt, and then come back to it later. And it can be a couple of hours later, it can be a day or two later, it can be a few weeks later. Most things that couples have to deal with actually are not emergencies, and you can go back to them repeatedly. Most couples sadly fall into the idea that we must solve it now because it's so important we have to solve it now. Most things you can come back to repeatedly. But the thing that I would give people is don't accidentally fall into the belief and the behavior that we have to sit down and get it all solved right now. Talk about it, get as far as you can, call a halt, come back later, get a little further, call a halt, come back later, and keep doing that. And what will eventually happen is you can eventually find ways for both people to be okay moving forward and moving in a direction. And part of this comes from the fact that some people's minds are changeable. They're just not changeable in the moment. They need time to reflect, and they need time to consider, and they need time to sit with, well, okay, do I want this thing more, or do I want to do something for my partner that I know is going to make them happy? And if you give them time, a lot of times people can come up with more creative solutions. They're more likely to be pliable. But the sitting down and we must hammer it out and nobody's allowed to leave the table until we do mentality that we all, so many of us come up with is really just a recipe for failure. So I just wanted to put that out there for people today. as a quick tip for your love relationship. Hopefully this is something you can get some use out of. And as always, if you are having enough difficulty that you can't get use out of these tips, it might be time to call a good relationship therapist. But hopefully this is useful today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for a minute. My name is Jonathan Pishner with Apex Counseling, and I will see you next time.